everyone, welcome back. We're diving back into some entitled people stories. Today we have 3 stories about workplace revenge, family boundary setting, and a customer who tried to bluff his way into a discount. At the end, we'll decide who wins, plus you vote which story is the best one. The day my micromanager proofread herself into embarrassment. Fresh out of college, armed with a shiny degree and a completely unrealistic belief that workplaces were mostly functional, I landed a job as a recruiter at a temp agency. I was eager, polite to a fault, and still in that phase of adulthood where you assume managers must know what they're doing simply because someone handed them authority. It took exactly 3 days for that illusion to crumble. Our branch manager was the kind of micromanager who treated autonomy like a contagious disease. Nothing, and I mean nothing, left the building without passing under her microscope. She insisted on proofreading every external email, no matter how routine, and demanded to be CC'd on all outgoing communication so she could maintain quality control. It didn't matter whether you were confirming an interview time or sending over a candidate resume, she wanted eyes on it. At first, I figured maybe she was just thorough. Then I realized it was less about quality and more about control. Her presence hovered over our inboxes like an anxious ghost. You'd spend 10 minutes drafting something professional and clear only for her to appear at your desk, lean over your shoulder, and start tinkering with it. Sometimes she'd swap perfectly good words for clunkier ones or rearrange sentences until they sounded like they'd been translated twice through Google. We all noticed it, but no one said anything because she had a habit of interpreting even mild pushback as insubordination. One afternoon, a coworker named Dana got a glowing response from a client thanking her for a particularly well-written email about a candidate placement. Before Dana could even enjoy the compliment, our manager swooped in and hit reply all. In her message, she graciously thanked the client for the feedback and explained that she personally oversaw all outgoing emails to ensure the highest professional standard. Dana just stared at her screen in disbelief. Later during our weekly staff meeting, the manager doubled down, announcing any positive feedback the agency receives is really a reflection of my editorial oversight. The room went silent in that unique corporate way where everyone's thinking the same thing but no one's brave enough to say it out loud. The irony was hard to miss. She wasn't exactly a wordsmith. I regularly caught misplaced commas, strange phrasing, and sentences that wandered off halfway through like they'd lost their sense of direction. Still, I kept my thoughts to myself. I needed the paycheck more than I needed to win a grammar debate. Then came the email. We had a major employer who brought in serious revenue for the agency, the kind of client you handle carefully because upsetting them could ripple straight up the profit chart. I drafted an email recommending a candidate, explaining that she would be an excellent fit for their open role based on her past experience managing similar projects. Clean, professional, harmless. I sent it to the manager for her mandatory review. A few minutes later, she marched over to my desk with the email open on her tablet. "Looks good overall," she said, tapping the screen, "but you need to change this phrase." I glanced down. Which one? Right here. It should say past experience, PASSED, not past experience, PAST. I blinked, certain I'd misheard her. Actually, PAST is correct. It refers to previous work history. She straightened slightly, the way people do when they sense their authority being challenged. No, it's past, as in the experience has passed. I tried once more, keeping my tone neutral. I'm pretty sure past is a verb in that context. Past is the adjective. She gave me a tight smile. I know the difference between the two words. Please correct it before sending. Now, I could have dug my heels in. I could have opened a dictionary tab and started a tiny linguistic showdown. But something in me, maybe exhaustion, maybe curiosity, decided this wasn't a hill worth dying on, so I nodded, changed it to past experience, PASSED, and sent the email exactly as instructed, with her prominently CC'd. The reply came the next morning. The client wrote, politely but unmistakably, "As someone who hires professionals to produce printed materials, I wanted to mention that the correct phrasing is past experience, PAST, not past experience, PASSED. Just thought you'd want to know." I read it twice, feeling that slow electric spark of opportunity. Malicious compliance doesn't always announce itself. Sometimes it just quietly clears its throat. I hit reply all. Thank you so much for pointing that out, I typed. We truly value feedback. Since my manager carefully proofreads all outgoing communication and emphasizes accuracy, she was actually the one who advised using past PASSED experience. I'll be sure she sees your note. I pressed send before I could overthink it. For the rest of the day, the office felt unusually calm, the kind of calm that usually means a storm is forming somewhere behind closed doors. The manager barely spoke to me, and when she did, it was with the brittle politeness of someone pretending not to swallow broken glass. The following morning, she called a brief team huddle. Without meeting anyone's eyes, she announced, effective immediately, I will no longer be proofreading outgoing external emails. You are all responsible for your own communication moving forward. Also, there is no need to CC me unless absolutely necessary. There was a beat of silence while everyone processed what we just heard. Then a chorus of carefully neutral, got it, and sounds good floated around the room. Dana caught my eye from across the bullpen, her lips twitching as she tried not to smile. Your reply was a masterpiece. You just politely told the truth. By publicly giving her the credit she demanded for overseeing the email, you held her directly and publicly responsible for its mistake. It was a perfect trap. She couldn't be mad you followed her orders, but she also couldn't defend the error to a valuable client. Work changed overnight. Emails went out faster, clients sounded less confused, the invisible leash loosened, and for the first time since I'd started, it felt like we were trusted to do the jobs we'd been hired for. The manager never mentioned the incident again, and neither did I. But from that day on, she kept a respectful distance from my drafts. Every now and then, I'd see her hesitate before offering a suggestion, as if haunted by the ghost of past experience. Turns out when you insist on having the final word, you'd better be ready to own it, especially when the dictionary's involved. And our second story. You said you were curious, so I started answering honestly. I'm the youngest in my family at 28, with two older brothers, Paul, who's 30, and Ben, who's 33. Ben is married to Ellie, and describing Ellie as a lot might be the most polite thing anyone has ever said about her. She's one of those people who treats boundaries like they're optional suggestions and believes every no is just the opening round of a negotiation she fully intends to win. Personal space, personal time, basic respect for other people's schedules, none of it seems to register with her. Ellie has this exhausting habit of asking for favors as if they're already agreed upon, and when someone declines, she immediately launches into a cross-examination worthy of a courtroom drama. She doesn't just want an answer, she wants justification, emotional vulnerability, and ideally a hint of guilt. It's like she thinks persistence is a personality trait instead of a warning sign. One of her favorite requests involves me acting as her chauffeur because she doesn't drive. It usually starts casually enough. Hey, I was thinking we could go shopping together this Saturday, she'll say, already smiling like she's done me a favor. I can't, I'll respond, I have plans. Then comes the inevitable tilt of her head. Who in this world refuses a shopping day with another woman? Apparently me, frequently. Another time she cornered Paul about helping with renovations at their house. She didn't ask if he was available. She announced it like she was reading his calendar. So you're free this weekend to help Ben remodel, right? Paul shook his head. I'm working all weekend. She blinked at him like he'd just spoken another language. Can't you take it off? Why wouldn't you prioritize helping your brother? It's a one-time thing. You'll have other weekends to work. Paul later told me he had to physically bite his tongue to avoid saying something that would start a family war. Eventually, both Paul and I sat down with Ben and Ellie to address it. We tried to keep it calm, reasonable, adult. Ellie, I said, you need to understand that people are allowed to say no without defending themselves. You're not entitled to everyone's time. She smiled politely, nodded, and said, I'm just naturally curious. I like understanding people's reasoning. Translation, absolutely nothing was going to change, and nothing did. So after months of polite refusals getting trampled, I decided to adjust my strategy. If she was going to ask invasive follow-up questions, I would answer them, honestly, directly, and without cushioning her feelings. The opportunity came sooner than expected. One Thursday evening, she called and asked if I could babysit my nephew that weekend so she and Ben could have time to reconnect. I can't, I told her. Pause, then right on cue, what could possibly be more important than spending time with your nephew? I took a slow breath and said, honestly, quite a few things. Resting after a full work week, catching up on sleep, having time to myself, seeing friends. I'm not available to be an on-demand babysitter. The silence on the other end of the phone was glorious. You took a gamble. She asked the loaded question, and instead of giving a polite, placating excuse, you gave her an honest list of things that were, in fact, more important to you at that moment. It was a shock to her system. She was used to breaking down excuses, but she had no playbook for, I have a life, and it's full. A couple weeks later, she tried again, this time with a grand plan for a family cabin trip. She sent the invite on a Thursday afternoon for a departure the very next day. None of us could make it. My parents had appointments. Paul had already committed to something with friends, and I had plans too. Ellie gathered us on a group call like she was hosting a press conference. I don't understand what plans could possibly be so important that you can't reschedule them for family time. I didn't even hesitate. I'm going to my best friend's birthday party, I said. Spending time with people whose company I genuinely enjoy is more important to me than rearranging my life with 24 hours notice. Paul choked on his drink. My mother suddenly found something fascinating on the ceiling. Ben looked like he was reconsidering every life decision that led him to that moment. Ellie went stiff. Wow, that was unnecessary. No, I replied calmly. You asked. After that, Paul started adopting a similar approach, though he's far more diplomatic than I am. When she asked him why he wouldn't cancel plans to help them reorganize their garage, he said, because I value commitments I already made. Still direct, but less spicy. I'll admit it, the first few times felt brutal, but also freeing. There's something incredibly satisfying about refusing to twist yourself into politeness just to accommodate someone who refuses to hear the word no. Ben, however, was not amused. He pulled us aside one night, clearly irritated. You two are humiliating my wife on purpose. I folded my arms. No, she's humiliating herself by refusing to respect boundaries. If you want us to stop being blunt, then she needs to stop interrogating people when they decline things. Paul nodded. We tried being polite. It didn't work. Ben sighed, the kind of sigh that comes from realizing your spouse is the common denominator in too many awkward conversations. To Ellie's credit, or maybe just exhaustion, she has started asking fewer follow-up questions lately. Not zero, but noticeably fewer. I like to think she finally realized that curiosity cuts both ways, and sometimes the answers you demand aren't the ones you want to hear. Do I sound harsh? Probably. I'm aware I'm not winning any gentlest sister-in-law awards anytime soon, but boundaries only work when you enforce them, and after years of being treated like our time was community property, honestly felt overdue. Paul and I still exchange looks whenever Ellie starts a sentence with, just wondering, because we both know what's coming next. And if she pushes, we answer calmly, truthfully, and without apology. It turns out that when someone insists on knowing exactly why you said no, the real shock isn't the answer, it's discovering that people actually mean it. And our last story. You must not know him very well. The morning a stranger tried to out-explain my own father to me. I work for my dad at his store, mostly running the front counter and handling customers. It's the kind of place where you quickly learn how to read people, who actually needs help, who's just browsing, and who's about to become a headache before they even open their mouth. I also happen to look a lot like my mom, so most people don't immediately realize I'm related to the owner unless it comes up in conversation. My dad runs another business as well, but his office is inside this store, so anyone looking for him usually starts here. That morning had been completely normal. Quiet, organized, the usual low hum of a workday just getting started. Then the front door flew open so hard the bell practically screamed, and in walked a guy who already looked irritated at the concept of being alive. His hair was messy, his shirt half-tucked, and he had that pacing energy of someone who had probably been arguing with traffic lights on the way over. He marched straight up to the counter and said, "Your dad here?" No hello, no good morning, just immediate attitude. You actually just missed him, I told him calmly. He's out running a couple errands this morning, but should be back later. His entire face tightened like I'd personally ruined his day. Well, that's just great, he muttered loudly, glancing around the store with exaggerated annoyance. A couple customers looked over. I've learned not to match that kind of energy. When someone shows up at a 10, the worst thing you can do is to meet them there. Is there something I can help you with in the meantime, I asked. Instead of answering, he wandered off into the aisles, picking things up, putting them down, sighing dramatically like he was performing for an audience. A minute later, he came back carrying a fairly expensive piece of equipment and dropped it onto the counter with a heavy clunk. I'm going to trade this for some work I did for your dad, he announced. Now, I know most of the people who have worked for my dad, even short-term hires. I'd never seen this guy before in my life. I can't negotiate anything while he's not here, I said evenly, and I definitely can't let merchandise leave the store without his approval. You're welcome to talk to him when he gets back. He leaned on the counter like we were about to start round one of some weird debate. You must not know him very well, he said with a smug little laugh. He'd do this for me. Me and him go way back. I paused for half a second, mostly so I could enjoy what I was about to say. I actually know him extremely well, I replied. He's my father. The silence was instant and beautiful. The moment he said, you must not know him very well, the entire scene changed. He was trying to use your lack of knowledge as leverage. When you revealed you were his daughter, it pulled the rug out from under his whole performance. You weren't just a random employee to argue with anymore. You were an insider. And he suddenly had no stage. It was like someone hit mute on his personality. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He blinked a few times and looked me over as if hoping I was joking. Oh, well, I didn't realize, he muttered. Internally, I was having a fantastic time. Externally, I stayed professional. He decided to wait, which meant hovering around the store for nearly 40 minutes. Every few minutes, he'd wander back toward the counter, glance at the office, sigh again, check his phone, then pace some more. Customers came and went. He stayed planted like an inconvenient lawn ornament. When my dad finally walked through the door, coffee in hand and completely unaware of the human thundercloud waiting for him, the guy practically jogged over. Hey, finally caught you, he said, suddenly much friendlier than he'd been with me. My dad gave him the polite but confused look he reserves for people he definitely doesn't recognize. Can I help you? I did some work for you a while back, the guy began. Figured we could trade for that equipment up front. My dad didn't hesitate. No. Just no. Calm, simple, immediate. The guy blinked. No. You worked 2 days, my dad continued. Then you quit without notice. Payroll goes out bi-weekly, which you were told when you started. Your check's already being processed, but that equipment costs a lot more than what you earned, so no, we're not trading. Watching realization spread across his face was almost artistic. He glanced at me briefly, probably replaying his earlier confidence and wishing he could rewind the entire morning. Well, I thought maybe you'd help me out. I am helping you out, my dad replied. You're getting paid for the hours you worked. That's how jobs function. There wasn't much left for him to argue after that. He mumbled something about coming back later for the check and shuffled toward the exit with significantly less swagger than he'd entered with. The bell rang again as the door shut behind him, and the store slipped right back into its normal rhythm. My dad walked over to the counter, raised an eyebrow, and asked, "He give you a hard time?" I shrugged. Tried to explain you to me? He laughed. That usually doesn't go well for people. For the rest of the day, every time I thought about his confident little, "You must not know him very well," I had to fight the urge to smile. There's something deeply satisfying about watching someone build their entire argument on an assumption that collapses in about 5 seconds. People love throwing around familiarity, like it's some kind of currency, acting like knowing someone automatically bends the rules in their favor. Most of the time, it just exposes how little they actually understand the person they're talking about. Not every morning comes with free entertainment, but this one did. Watching a stranger try to out-explain my own father to me, only to stick around long enough to hear a very firm no straight from the source, was easily the highlight of the day. All 3 stories are victories for setting boundaries and letting arrogance backfire. Story 1's the most strategically brilliant. It used malicious compliance to dismantle a toxic policy without direct confrontation. Story 2 is the most personally empowering, teaching that blunt honesty can be the ultimate boundary. Story 3 is the most instantly satisfying, where a simple revelation deflates a bully's ego. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.